Britannica 2023 describes institutional racism as a perpetual discrimination based on race, political, economic, or legal institutions and systems. Residential segregation, unequal funding for schools, and discriminatory lending practices have all been highlighted in the news as examples of institutional racism. However, one of the most damning examples of our country's federal policies disproportionately impacting marginalized groups is the prohibition of marijuana. Throughout my life, I've witnessed several childhood friends enter the criminal justice system as a result of marijuana policies. While laws are supposed to exist to protect our country's citizens, the decision to label marijuana as a Schedule I narcotic has done the opposite, criminalizing marginalized groups, while legal substances such as alcohol contribute to approximately 178,000 deaths annually, according to the CDC. Institutional racism and a contempt for the hippie generation contributed to the decision to label marijuana as a narcotic in the early 1970s as part of the Controlled Substances Act. Since its implementation, research has revealed that marijuana possesses many medical benefits. Prohibition wastes public resources as opposed to generating tax revenue, and cannabis laws are disproportionately enforced, resulting in an exorbitant number of Black and brown Americans entering the criminal justice system. These factors prove that marijuana should no longer be labeled as a Schedule I narcotic and should be federally legalized for recreational use. To fully comprehend why marijuana should be legalized, we must first understand why it became legal to begin with. Early in the 20th century, marijuana use was commonly associated with Black musicians and Latinos. Later on in the 1960s, the country was engulfed in the Vietnam War, and anti-war sympathizers and members of the hippie generation culture began to rise at an exponential rate. These subgroups instilled fear amongst the political elite of that generation. Government officials produced a propaganda campaign to vilify these groups, opening the pathway to the creation of the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. According to the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, the Controlled Substances Act places all substances that were in some manner regulated under existing federal law into one of 5 schedules. This placement is based upon the substance's medicinal use, potential for abuse, and safety of dependence liability. Drugs categorized as Schedule 3, 4, or 5 are drugs with a moderate to low potential for physical and psychological dependence. The higher the schedule, the lower the potential for abuse. While these drugs are perceived to be less dangerous, prescription drugs with a history of abuse, such as ketamine and Xanax, are labeled as Schedule 3 and 4 drugs, which have much less regulation than marijuana. While the CSA recognizes that Schedule 2 drugs such as cocaine and fentanyl are highly addictive, they also acknowledge that there are medicinal benefits to these drugs that are frequently associated with crippling addiction and overdoses. However, marijuana, which has proven medicinal benefits and has been proven to be less addictive compared to opioids, is listed as a Schedule I narcotic, which is reserved for drugs like heroin and LSD, which have no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. In contradiction to marijuana's inclusion as a Schedule I narcotic, marijuana has been proven to contain many medicinal uses. When marijuana was initially categorized as a Schedule I narcotic, there was little to no research that has been performed in the United States to verify the assumption that there was no medical use for the drug. While the DEA and the American Medical Association failed to invest in medical marijuana research, there is a long history of marijuana being used for medicinal purposes. According to the University of Sydney, the medicinal properties of the cannabis plant have been known for millennia. As far back as 2800 BC, cannabis was used to treat a vast array of health problems and was listed in Emperor Shenhun's Pharmacopoeia, the man regarded as the father of Chinese medicine. Although Shenhun is recognized as the first to document these therapeutic uses, medicinal uses of marijuana has been mentioned in the texts of the Indian Hindus, Assyrians, Greeks, and Romans. These texts reported that cannabis could treat a vast array of different health problems, including arthritis, depression, amenorrhea, inflammation, pain, lack of appetite, and asthma. While the world history books have acknowledged that these healing properties, the United States has been behind the 8 ball. Research on these benefits gained momentum in 1996 following the passage of the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, which exempted certain patients and their primary caregivers from criminal liability under state law for the possession and cultivation of marijuana for medicinal use. Following the passing of Proposition 215, large-scale investments were made to investigate the various uses of marijuana. Institutions such as the Mayo Clinic have uncovered several conditions that can be treated with marijuana, including PTSD, HIV/AIDS, MS, Alzheimer's, and severe nausea caused by cancer treatments. While the medicinal properties of marijuana suggest that its classification as a Schedule I narcotic could be reconsidered, the public resources needed to enforce these regulations provide another argument for allowing its medicinal use, or its recreational use for that matter. Enforcing marijuana-related laws places a significant strain on various components of our criminal justice system. While the exorbitant costs associated with policing the drug have been well documented, billions are spent on inmate housing and appellate court fees. It is estimated that legalizing marijuana use would lower the estimated $3.6 billion spent on federal marijuana law enforcement per year. In addition to reducing the government's expenditure on marijuana-related law enforcement, the abolishment of marijuana prohibition has proven to generate jobs as well as billions in tax revenue. Currently, there are over 15,000 medical marijuana dispensaries in the United States. These dispensaries help contribute to the 428,000 full-time jobs created by the legal cannabis industry. In addition to the jobs the legal cannabis industry has created, over $20 billion in tax revenue was generated from legal adult use cannabis sales through the first quarter of 2024 alone. Now, while tax revenue from legal marijuana meets our economic requirements as a society, an equally significant reason for the legalization of recreational marijuana is to rectify the unequal enforcement of cannabis laws. The prohibition of marijuana has been linked to millions of Americans entering the criminal justice system at a young age. Over 52% of all drug arrests in 2010 were for simple possession of marijuana. A simple drug arrest, or worse, a criminal conviction, can stand in the way of securing a job, getting housing, or receiving a professional license, student loan, food assistance, driver's license, or firearms permit. Even though data suggests African Americans and white Americans ingest marijuana at a similar rate, African Americans are nearly 4 times more likely than their white counterparts to be arrested for marijuana possession. In 2020, despite representing only 13.6% of the American population, Black Americans accounted for approximately 38.8% of marijuana possession arrests nationwide. While we may recognize the fear associated with reversing a law that has been in place for over 50 years, precedents are now in place across the country that mitigate the risk associated with federally legalizing marijuana for recreational use. 24 states, 2 territories, and the District of Columbia have all legalized small amounts of cannabis for adult or recreational use. The abolishment of prohibition in these areas has effectively removed the drug from controlled substances lists within these locales, allowing the state to profit from millions of dollars in tax revenue. These changes have also allowed patients to take advantage of the drug's medicinal benefits, while allowing law enforcement to focus on more dangerous crimes. The Controlled Substances Act of 1971 was created out of fear and institutional racism. Over the past 50 years, medicinal benefits associated with marijuana have been uncovered. Public resources have been wasted, and a disproportionate number of minorities have been imprisoned. These factors prove that marijuana should no longer be labeled as a Schedule I narcotic and should be federally legalized for recreational use. While we recognize that laws are in place to protect the masses, when we examine the laws associated with the marijuana in this country, we must remember the famous quote by St. Augustine of Hippo: "An unjust law is no law at all." The time is now to legalize marijuana. Thank you.